A humble girl helps a man in the park. She would never guess he was a disguised millionaire. What happens next will touch your heart. Hello viewer, thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Emma Thompson pulled her jacket tighter as a cool breeze swept through Central Park. That early Sunday morning, the sky held a promise of autumn. With orange-tinted leaves clinging to the branches overhead, a sense of anticipation flickered in Emma's eyes. Despite her usual exhaustion from double shifts at the hospital, at 35 she felt weighed down by responsibility: her sister Lucy's college bills, their shared apartment, rent in the Bronx, and the constant need to prove she could handle anything life threw at her. She found a bench near the lake, her favorite spot, to catch a rare moment of calm. Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly as she sipped from a paper cup of hot coffee, savoring the simple pleasure. She ran a hand through her medium-length brown hair, which she usually kept in a practical ponytail for work. Her eyes, though gentle, reflected a quiet resilience that had carried her through long nights and difficult choices. A copy of a nursing journal lay open on her lap. She was determined to stay informed about the latest patient care methods, even on her day off. Emma had always loved caring for people, ever since she was a teenager, watching over Lucy when their mother worked late. Now, as a professional nurse, she found meaning in helping others, though she often felt her own needs were pushed to the bottom of the list. Just as Emma was closing her journal, a sudden cry of pain cut through the stillness of the park. She looked up and spotted a man around her age, stumbling on the running path. Without thinking twice, she jumped up from the bench and rushed toward him. Heart pounding with concern, the man had collapsed, clearly in pain, clutching his left ankle. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, kneeling beside him on the gravel. He was breathing heavily, wincing as he tried to sit up. I'm not sure, my ankle. I felt a pop," he muttered, clearly trying to remain composed. He had dark hair, slightly damp from jogging, and wore a simple gray hoodie and running shorts. Years of nursing instincts kicked in. She swiftly checked his ankle for swelling. "I'm Emma. I'm a nurse. Can you tell me your name?" He hesitated for a beat, as if deciding what to share. "I'm James," he said, managing a pained smile. His voice trembled with discomfort, but was surprisingly warm. Emma instructed him to stay still while she tested the range of motion. The slight swelling and tenderness suggested a sprain, possibly more. "You need to get this looked at properly," she advised. "At the very least, I can help you wrap it." James nodded, grimacing. He tried to stand, and Emma braced him by the elbow. He was taller than she expected, maybe 6 feet, and though he leaned on her for support, he didn't appear weak. There was an air of polite humility about him. A few bystanders offered curious glances, but Emma stayed focused. She improvised a bandage with a lightweight scarf she had in her bag, tying it firmly around James's ankle. He winced, but thanked her repeatedly for her help. "I think I can walk, but I doubt I can make it too far," he admitted, testing his foot gingerly on the ground. Emma noticed how he bit back a groan, trying not to seem helpless. She pointed toward a small cafe, just a short distance away. "Let's get you somewhere you can rest." The cafe there is quiet. At least sit down and have some water before deciding what to do next." "Thank you," he breathed, relieved. "I don't want to trouble you." She gave him a kind but firm look. "You won't make it far alone, trust me." With Emma's arm supporting him, they hobbled over to the outdoor seating area. Along the way, James apologized more than once, apparently worried that he was interrupting her morning off. "You're not interrupting anything," she assured him as they settled at a small metal table. "I was just reading, and believe me, as a nurse, I'm used to emergencies." He gave a sheepish grin. "Well, I'm definitely grateful. Not many people would jump to help a stranger." Emma shrugged, feeling a pang of self-consciousness. "People need kindness, and I guess I just do what I can." There was a quiet moment as they regarded each other. Emma noticed the hint of gratitude and curiosity in James's gaze, while she felt a pull of compassion mingled with intrigue. Something about him beyond the unfortunate injury drew her in. He seemed both guarded and oddly genuine. She broke the silence. "Look, we should ice your ankle at least. Maybe we can get a bag of ice inside." He nodded, exhaling slowly. "Right, let him do that." And so, under the canopy of autumn leaves and the watchful eye of the morning sun, the two strangers found themselves sharing a table. One injured and the other eager to help, both unaware that this chance meeting would reshape their lives in the days and weeks to come. Settled at the small outdoor table, James shifted in his seat, wincing whenever his left foot brushed the ground. Emma reached into her tote bag for a small notebook. She scribbled a quick note: ice ankle check. For further swelling, possible x-ray. If pain persists, her job left her little room for guesswork, and she intended to stay organized, even in casual settings. After a moment she looked up. I can go inside and ask for some ice. You think you'll be okay here alone? James offered. A half smile. Yes, I'll be fine, thank you. Emma stood, tucking the stray curl behind her ear, before heading into the cafe inside. The cozy interior contrasted the bustling noise of bigger coffee shops. She approached the counter and explained the situation to a sympathetic barista, who quickly filled a plastic bag with ice. When Emma returned, James was studying the passing joggers with a thoughtful expression. Thank you, he said. Accepting the makeshift ice pack, he pressed it gently against his swollen ankle and sighed with relief as the cold numbed the pain. Does that help? Emma asked, sitting back down. He nodded a lot. After a few seconds, he cleared his throat, glancing at Emma curiously. You said you're a nurse, right? Do you work nearby? She shifted, not wanting to complain, but feeling the need to be truthful. I work at St. Margaret's Hospital in the Bronx. It's a community hospital, so we're always short on staff and supplies. I also pick up part-time shifts at a clinic to make ends meet. James's brow furrowed. That sounds exhausting. It can be, Emma admitted, softly, gaze drifting to the trees behind him. But it's important. My young sister Lucy is in college, and I help cover her expenses. Our parents passed away when we were young, so it's just the two of us. I want her to have a better life, so I work a lot. She paused, realizing how much she'd revealed. Sorry, I don't mean to overshare. You're not oversharing, James replied gently, setting the ice bag aside. I respect that taking care of a sibling is no small thing. Emma smiled, a mixture of pride and wariness etched across her face. I just do what I have to do. James hesitated, seemingly battling an inner conflict. He opened his mouth, then closed it, as if thinking better of what he initially wanted to say. Finally, he spoke again in a steadier tone. So what do you do for fun? She gave a rude laugh. Fun? Well, sometimes I read medical articles mostly, or random novels. If I have the energy, I walk in the park on Sunday mornings like today. That's about it. Honestly, he smiled, and for a moment, Emma saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Compassion, or maybe admiration. That's better than nothing, he said. At least you have this little ritual. Speaking of which, Emma said, glancing at her watch, this is usually when I go grab a coffee or a simple breakfast from the kiosk over there. Can I get you something? James's posture tensed. He patted the pocket of his shorts, then shook his head. I left my wallet at home. I'd feel terrible taking your money. Emma waved off his concern with a gentle laugh. Please don't worry. Think of it as thanks for letting me practice my nursing skills on you. She stood up before he could protest further and headed to the kiosk. She returned a few minutes later with 2 cups of coffee and a modest pastry split onto 2 plates, handing 1 cup to James. She said, I know you're probably not supposed to have too much sugar if you're recovering, but a little cinnamon roll might lift your spirits. James accepted it with an appreciative nod. Thank you. I owe you. Emma over coffee. Their conversation grew warmer. Emma learned James was between jobs, though he offered few specifics. He asked her about her family, her childhood, and her dreams. She in turn asked about his hobbies, and he spoke vaguely about traveling, about wanting to see the world beyond office walls. Occasionally, Emma noticed a guarded quality in his voice, as if he were leaving out major details, yet he was polite, curious, and attentive. When she spoke, she found herself relaxing, discovering that she liked his company. After finishing their coffee, Emma insisted on hailing a cab for James. Though the bag of ice helped, he still couldn't walk comfortably. At first he resisted, but eventually nodded, thanking her again and again. As she helped him into the back seat of a yellow taxi, he looked up at her. Ungrateful, Emma. Really, I hope I can repay the kindness. Somehow her cheeks warmed slightly. Just take care of that ankle and get it checked if the pain doesn't improve. That's thanks enough, he smiled, and the taxi door closed. Emma watched as the car pulled away feeling both a sense of relief and an unfamiliar tug of curiosity. Something about James lingered in her mind. She brushed off the thought, telling herself it was just her nurturing instincts, but the flutter in her chest suggested otherwise. Emma's sneakers squeaked against the polished hospital floor as she made her way toward the staff locker room. The overhead lights hummed, casting harsh reflections on the tiled surfaces, a constant reminder of the sterile reality she inhabited during her double shifts. She was tired, so tired that her hands trembled slightly from too many cups of bad coffee and not enough sleep. That fleeting encounter with James kept replaying in her mind. She'd only spent about an hour with him, yet something in his eyes made her feel seen. It was a far cry from her usual experiences, where people appreciated her professional expertise, but rarely saw the woman behind the nurse scrubs. "Emma, you okay?" She glanced up to see Margaret Bell, a veteran nurse in her 50s with sharp eyes and a perpetual air of quiet authority. Margaret had become a mentor figure at work, always ready with advice. Emma forced a small smile. "I'm all right, just a bit worn out." Margaret studied her with a kind of maternal vigilance. "Let's catch up after the shift. I want to hear how you're really doing," she said firmly before heading off to check a patient chart. Nodding, Emma slipped into the locker room to change into her scrubs. She recalled James's smile and how he'd insisted on thanking her. It was unusual for a stranger to show such earnest gratitude. Part of her wanted to believe his sincerity, but another part, scarred by past betrayals, tried to remain cautious. A few hours later, the ER was packed. Emma found herself dealing with a range of cases: a toddler with a high fever, an elderly man complaining of chest pains, and a teen with a possible broken wrist. She threw herself into her work, welcoming the familiar bustle. At least here she knew her role, her purpose between patients. Emma's mind wandered in the corridor. She crossed paths with Brian Collier, a paramedic she dated briefly 2 years ago. His once charming grin now looked more smug than reassuring. She ducked her head, hoping to avoid conversation. But Brian stepped in front of her. "Long time no see," he said, arms folded over his uniform. Emma stifled a sigh. "Hi, Brian." He eyed her with mild curiosity. "You look distracted. Anything or anyone new in your life?" She pressed her lips together, unwilling to share details. "Just busy with work, that's all," she replied curtly. Brian gave a skeptical chuckle. "Well, if you ever need a friend, I'm good, thanks." Emma cut in, her voice firm. She slipped past him and kept walking, her heart racing with a mix of annoyance and relief. She remembered how Brian had gradually revealed his true colors: irresponsible with money, dismissive of her ambitions, and too comfortable borrowing cash. He never returned. Later, during a lull in the ER chaos, Margaret motioned Emma to join her in the break room. The two sat down with paper cups of lukewarm coffee. "All right, spill it," Margaret urged. "You look like you have something on your mind." Emma hesitated, then quietly recounted the events of that Sunday morning, finding James, helping him, and the curious sense of connection she felt. She left out the deeper personal reactions, still unsure how to categorize them. Margaret listened attentively, nodding. "He could be a nice guy. You know, you deserve some happiness outside these walls." Emma fiddled with her cup's plastic lid. "Maybe, but I barely know him, and the last time I let someone into my life, it didn't end well." Margaret sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Honey, life has no guarantees. Sometimes we give our trust and get burned. Other times we give it and find a piece of joy we never expected. Holding back might protect you, but it also shuts out possibilities." Emma considered her words. She knew Margaret spoke from experience. She'd mentioned a difficult divorce and the regret of missed opportunities when she was younger. By the end of her shift, Emma felt torn. She wanted to reach out to James to see if his ankle had improved, to find out more about who he was, yet a part of her insisted it might be safe to leave it as a random act of kindness. Exiting the hospital into the damp night air, she pulled out her phone. No new messages. Of course, he didn't have her number, nor had she asked for his. She shrugged it off as she headed to the subway station. On the ride home, Emma clutched the metal pole and tried to ignore the ache in her feet. She let her mind drift to Lucy, her bright artistic younger sister, whose future was hinged on Emma's support. If Lucy needed more funds for textbooks or housing, Emma couldn't afford distractions. That was her priority, her responsibility. Still, as the train rattled through dark tunnels, Emma couldn't help picturing James sitting across from her, sipping coffee and listening to her stories with genuine curiosity. She silently wondered if their paths might cross again, or if fate had offered only that brief glimpse into a different life, one she dared not hope to embrace. Sunlight spilled through the small window of Emma's apartment in the Bronx, illuminating the worn-out couch and second-hand furniture. She sat at her modest kitchen table, flipping through the mail with a heavy sigh. Bills and more bills. The rent invoice glared up at her, followed by Lucy's tuition statement. Lucy is worth every penny, Emma reminded herself under her breath. The pang of guilt set in as she realized she might have to pick up yet another extra shift if Lucy's next batch of fees came due sooner than expected. Her sister was only 22, but Lucy's talent for painting had already earned her a scholarship, though not enough to cover everything. Emma's phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. She recognized Lucy's number and answered quickly. "Hey, Em." Lucy's voice chirped through the speaker. "I got the results of my midterm project. The professor loved it." Emma smiled, leaning against the counter. "That's fantastic, Lou. I'm so proud of you." Lucy's excitement spilled over. "I wanted to ask if I could come to the city this weekend. There's an art exhibit at MoMA I really want to see. Maybe we can spend some time together." Emma's heart lifted. She missed her sister's presence, missed the creative spark Lucy always brought. "I'd love that. Just let me figure out my work schedule." They chatted a bit more, Lucy's optimism providing a welcome contrast to Emma's worries. But when the call ended, Emma was left staring at the rent notice again. She rubbed her temples, feeling a familiar wave of anxiety. Later that day, she trudged into St. Margaret's Hospital for another shift. Glancing at her phone screen, she noticed a text from Margaret. "Emma, if you need to talk, my office door is open." It made her feel slightly better knowing she wasn't alone in facing life's burdens. Mid-shift, the overhead speakers page she rushed to the nurse's station, expecting an urgent call. Instead, she found Margaret waiting with a sympathetic look. "Emma, there's a shortage tonight in the pediatric unit," Margaret explained gently. "They need an experienced nurse. I know you're exhausted, but can you handle it?" Emma inhaled, forcing a nod. "Of course, I'll manage." As she moved between patients, children with fevers, coughs, and broken bones, she pushed away her personal troubles, adopting the professional calm necessary in a hospital setting. But the emotional strain of seeing sick kids never fully left her, and it added to the weight she already carried. During a short break in the hallway, Brian Collier happened to pass by. Spotting Emma, he arched an eyebrow. "Pediatrics, you're branching out," he teased. "It's called helping where I'm needed," Emma replied, forcing politeness. Brian shrugged, stepping closer. "Look, I know we've had our differences, but I'm serious when I say I'm here if you need anything. A ride, money, advice." Emma stiffened. He was hitting too close to her vulnerabilities. "I appreciate the thought, but no thank you," she managed, trying to keep her voice calm. "Suit yourself," Brian said, raising his hands in mock surrender. Before walking away, the rest of the shift passed in a blur of administering medications, comforting crying children, and filling out charts. By the time Emma clocked out, her back ached and her eyelids drooped. She didn't think she had any energy left to consider her personal life, let alone the memory of James Harrison. Yet her mind wandered unbidden to his warm expression and quiet gratitude. She wondered if he'd sought proper medical attention for his ankle. The thought nagged at her, sparking an inner debate. Should she try to find him? It was a city of millions. Perhaps it was pointless. The following day, Lucy called again, worried about a new course fee that had suddenly been added. Emma reassured her sister, even though she didn't have a solution. Yet the pressure to provide grew with every conversation about finances. She reminded herself that she'd do anything to help Lucy succeed, even if it meant sacrificing her own rest or potential happiness. Emma packed her bag, ready to leave for another shift. Before stepping out, she took a moment to glance at herself in the mirror. Tired eyes, hair hastily pinned back, posture a bit slumped. The reflection showed a woman on the edge, burdened by responsibilities, yet determined not to fail. Inhaling deeply, she told herself, "I just need to keep going." But as she locked her apartment door behind her, She couldn't shake the sense that something crucial was missing from her life, a small light that flickered brief when she'd met James now. It threatened to go out under the mounting pressures of rent tuition and endless hospital shifts on Thursday evening. Emma trudged down the cracked concrete steps of the hospital's main entrance, exhaling a long breath. Her shift had ended on a somber note. She'd spent the last 2 hours comforting the family of a patient who needed to be transferred to a more specialized facility. The emotional weight clung to her like a damp blanket. She glanced at her phone to check the time. It was nearly 9 o'clock. Lucy had texted to confirm her weekend visit, making Emma smile despite her exhaustion. She texted back, looking forward to it, love you. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she caught sight of a figure leaning against a nearby lamppost, favoring one leg. It took her a moment to realize it was James Harrison, the man she'd helped in Central Park days ago. Her heart jolted. He was holding a small bouquet of daisies, nothing extravagant but sweet in its simplicity. Emma approached cautiously, unsure if her mind was playing tricks. James, what are you doing here? A slightly embarrassed grin spread across his face. I wanted to thank you properly. I didn't know which hospital you worked at exactly. Turns out there's more than one near the Bronx, but I found you eventually. He held out the daisies with a gentle smile. I'm not a stalker, I promise. I just needed to say thanks. Despite her fatigue, Emma felt a flicker of warmth. She accepted the flowers, noticing the mild limp in his stance. Your ankle, does it still hurt? He shrugged a little. Yeah, but it's much better. I had it checked out. Just a sprain like you thought. There was something in his eyes, earnest gratitude mixed with uncertainty, like he wasn't sure if she'd welcome his presence. Emma looked at the daisies and then back at him. You really didn't have to do this. I wanted to, James said simply. Then he hesitated, almost bashful. Also, I'm aware you have to be busy, but I was hoping to take you for coffee again. This time I'll pay if my card doesn't magically fail me. He forced a small laugh at the memory of his awkward excuse. That first day, she felt a gentle flutter of nerves, remembering Margaret's advice about letting life in. Yes, sure, she replied, the word surprising even herself. There was a hint of a smile forming on her lips. They headed to a modest diner around the corner. Inside, warm lights reflected on checkered floors. The place smelled of pancakes, fried eggs, and brewed coffee, comforting scents that reminded Emma of Karma times. They found a booth by a window, each sliding into seats across from one another. You look exhausted, James noted, softly concerned. Evident long shift. Emma let out a wry chuckle. Every shift is long, but I managed. She took a sip of water. The waiter dropped off. What about you? Are you back to your regular routine? James took a moment to answer, as though weighing his words, still figuring things out. He said finally, I've been on a break from work, trying to clear my head. I guess. She nodded, though the vagueness piqued her curiosity. That's good. Sometimes stepping away helps you see things more clearly. They ordered 2 coffees, and a comfortable hush settled between them. Outside, the city lights sparkled against the evening sky. Emma felt a surge of relief, as if for a brief moment she wasn't just a nurse or a guardian for Lucy. She was a woman allowed to enjoy a simple cup of coffee with someone who seemed to genuinely care. Over the steaming mugs, their conversation flowed. He asked about her sister, about why Emma had chosen nursing, about her favorite parts of living in the Bronx. She spoke freely, realizing how rarely she got to talk about herself without feeling like a burden. In return, she tried to glean more about James. He offered fragments, how he found city life both thrilling and stifling, how he appreciated meeting real people who worked hard, yet he remained deliberately vague about his background. At some point, Emma let out a light laugh. You're mysterious, you know that, but I don't mind. She looked down, unsure if she was overstepping. Thank you for coming here tonight. It means more than you know. James exhaled relief, settling in his gaze. I'm glad you're not offended or anything. He glanced at her tired eyes. Though I really don't want to keep you out too late. Emma glanced at the time. A sense of responsibility flickered. She had an early shift the next day, Lucy's visit to plan, and the usual bills to about. Yet for once she let herself linger a little longer. A few more minutes won't hurt, she said quietly, surprising even herself With how much she wanted this moment to last as they finally rose to leave, Emma felt a subtle shift within, like a door cracking open to let in the smallest beam of light. Her life, once defined entirely by duty, now had a faint new outline. She wasn't sure how or why, but she sensed that taking a step into the unknown might be worth the risk. Outside, James offered to walk her to the subway station. She accepted, Daisy's in hand, heart oddly full, and for the first time in years she let herself hope that this simple connection, forged through kindness and shared cups of coffee, might spark a change she never knew she needed. Emma entered St. Margaret Hospital on a sunny afternoon, the bright rays outside contrasting sharply with the dim corridors she knew so well. Her mind, usually full of checklists and patient details, was drifting toward thoughts of James. The memory of their late-night diner chat lingered, his earnest gaze, the gentle way he'd limped alongside her toward the subway. She felt a confusing mix of excitement and uncertainty, like stepping onto a path without a clear destination before starting her shift. She ducked into the staff lounge, where she found Margaret Bell rearranging a stack of medical charts on a small table. The seasoned nurse glanced up, her observant eyes locking onto Emma's in an instant. Margaret greeted with a knowing smile. "I've seen that look before. Something's on your mind." Emma managed a sheepish laugh as she poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee. "Is it that obvious?" Margaret put the charts aside. "When you're preoccupied, you twist that little ring on your finger over and over." She nodded at the simple silver band Emma wore, a memento from her mother. "Now out with it." Emma sighed, realizing there was no point hiding her thoughts. "I've been spending time with someone, nothing serious." But she trailed off, feeling her cheeks warm. Margaret raised her brows with interest. "This wouldn't happen to be the man you helped in Central Park, would it?" Emma blinked, surprised. "How did you? I noticed flowers in your locker the other day." Margaret teased gently. "Daisies, if I recall correctly. Plus, you've been smiling to yourself more than usual." Emma smiled, shaking her head in mild embarrassment. "His name's James. He came by the hospital to thank me. We grabbed coffee, and I don't know, there's something about him, but I can't quite figure him out. He's vague about his life. Part of me wonders if I'm ignoring red flags." Margaret leaned forward. "What do your instincts tell you? That he's good, kind?" Emma replied quietly. "He's respectful, listens when I talk, and there's a sincerity in how he treats me. But I barely know him, and my track record with relationships isn't exactly stellar." Margaret placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "Sometimes we close ourselves off because we fear repeating old mistakes, but if we never let anyone in, we deny ourselves the chance for genuine happiness. All I'd say is be cautious yet open." Emma nodded, soaking in her mentor's words. Margaret often had a knack for giving grounded advice, never reckless, but never so guarded that it stifled life's possibilities. A few hours later, Emma found herself in a routine swirl of charting vitals, administering medications, and answering the doctor's endless questions. Occasionally, she caught herself checking her phone, half hoping James might text. She reminded herself not to get distracted during critical tasks. Lives depended on her focus, but it was hard to ignore the little flutter in her heart when she thought about him during a slower moment. Near the end of her shift, she passed Margaret in the hallway again. The older nurse handed Emma a folder full of patient surveys. "Take these to the admin desk, will you? And don't forget," she added in a softer tone, "you work hard." "Emma, let yourself have some joy." Emma offered a grateful nod and continued on her way, her mind replaying Margaret's advice. She recognized in Margaret the role of a mentor, a guiding voice reminding her that while duty was essential, her own life needed nurturing too. By the time Emma stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, her feet ached from endless walking, she fished out her phone and noticed an unread message from James. "Hey Emma, I hope your shift went well. I'm at a little bookstore cafe in Midtown. If you're free, I'd love to buy you another cup of coffee. Actually pay for it this time. No strings attached, just good conversation." Emma couldn't help smiling at the text. Thoughts of Lucy's upcoming visit hovered at the edge of her mind. She needed to prepare for that and check her finances, but maybe an hour or two away from the hospital grind wouldn't hurt. She took a moment, recalling Margaret's words, "Be cautious yet open." She typed a quick reply, "Give me an hour. I'll try to swing by," as she boarded a bus toward Midtown. Emma felt a subtle shift within her, like the first steps crossing into unfamiliar territory. She was usually the reliable nurse, the responsible older sister, the woman who kept her personal life on a tight leash. Now, guided by encouragement from someone she trusted, she was allowing herself to follow a path she'd only glimpsed from a distance. Settling into a seat, she stared out the window at the streets of New York, bustling with people chasing their own goals and dreams. Emma felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she was finally stepping out of her comfort zone, caring to see what life had to offer, and maybe, just maybe, this path with James was worth exploring, wherever it might lead. The little bookstore cafe in Midtown greeted Emma with the aroma of freshly ground beans and the gentle murmur of pages turning. The walls were lined with shelves, each brimming with novels, travel guides, and biographies. Soft jazz music played from an old record player in the corner, adding a mellow ambiance that was worlds away from the sterile brightness of Margaret's hospital. James stood near a display of classic literature, his posture a bit awkward as he shifted from foot to foot. He looked genuinely relieved when he spotted Emma walking through the door. His dark hair was combed neatly, and he wore a simple green sweater over jeans, still dressed casually but with an attention to detail that made him look put together. "Hey," he greeted, voice warm, a slight flush creeping across his cheeks. "Thanks for coming," Emma nodded, offering a small smile. "I could use a break," she admitted. "Long shift, too much paperwork." A cozy cafe and a good conversation sounded perfect. He motioned to a corner table where two steaming cups sat waiting. "I already ordered coffee." "Hope that's okay. I asked them to wait on any food until you arrived." Emma raised her eyebrows. "Look at you, so confident I'd show up." James scratched the back of his neck, smiling in a self-conscious way. "Well, I was hopeful." They settled into chairs, sipping coffee that tasted far richer than the hospital's vending machine brew. For a moment they simply enjoyed each other's company in companionable silence. Emma glanced around, appreciating the quiet corners filled with people lost in books. A kind of peacefulness settled over her, a contrast to her normal hustle. Eventually James spoke. "I know you're used to seeing people at their worst. Sick, injured, vulnerable. But you seem to carry it so gracefully. How do you manage that?" Emma considered the question, her gaze drifting to her cup. "I guess I've always felt a pull to care for others. My mother was a kindergarten teacher. She taught me compassion early on, and after my dad died, I naturally took on a nurturing role for Lucy." She paused, swirling the coffee. "Some days are tougher than others, but it's part of who I am." James nodded slowly. "It shows you have this calm strength about you." She felt the compliment warm her cheeks and decided to gently turn the conversation back on him. "What about you, James? You mentioned you've been on a break. Are you between jobs?" A brief flicker of unease crossed his features. "Something like that. I guess you could say I needed a break from a high-pressure environment. A chance to live life a bit differently." Emma studied him. There was genuine tension behind his eyes, but he seemed reluctant to divulge more. "I understand. And the need to escape pressure," she said gently, not pushing. He managed a small smile. "It's not easy leaving behind everything you know, but it helps you learn what really matters." The conversation meandered into lighter territory. Favorite books, travel stories, silly memories from childhood. James shared how he once tried to run away as a kid because he wanted to see the Grand Canyon, and how he ended up lost a mere 5 blocks from home. Emma laughed, picturing a younger version of him, rebellious and curious. When their cups emptied, he insisted on ordering pastries. Emma hesitated, mindful of money and time, but ultimately agreed, letting herself enjoy a slice of simple pleasure. As the hour wore on, Emma realized she was doing something she rarely allowed herself. She was relaxing. The nurse's vigilance in her mind took a back seat, allowing the woman in her to come forward. Eventually, she glanced at the clock on the cafe wall. "I hate to cut this short, but Lucy's arriving in the city tomorrow, and I have errands to run." James nodded, though the hint of disappointment was there. "Could I walk you out?" They stepped back onto the busy Manhattan streetlights flickering above the sun sidewalk. Emma savored the crisp air against her cheeks, feeling momentarily removed from the weight of her usual responsibilities. At the curb, James gently reached for her hand. "Listen, Emma, I'd like to see you again. Maybe do something more fun, a break from our normal routines. His palm felt warm against hers. She considered his offer carefully. She had so many obligations, but the idea of doing something out of the ordinary, even just once, appealed to her. "All right," she said, nodding. "I'll think about it. And we'll find a time, but be warned, my schedule is pretty crazy." He grinned, relief and joy crossing his face. "I'll take whatever time you can spare." She gave his hand a gentle squeeze before releasing it. "Thank you for tonight. I really needed this." As she walked away, Emma felt a rush of mixed emotions. Gratitude, uncertainty, and a glimmer of excitement for the first time in a long while. She was making a choice that didn't revolve around solving someone else's problem or fulfilling a duty. She was stepping over the threshold into a realm of possibility, trusting her heart just enough to see where it might lead. That weekend, Lucy arrived at Emma's apartment in the Bronx, lugging the suitcase filled with paintbrushes, half-finished canvases, and an eclectic wardrobe. The two sisters embraced in the narrow hallway, giggling at how Lucy nearly knocked Emma over with the weight of her bag. "Careful," Emma teased. "I know you're all about making bold statements with your art, but let's not start by breaking my hip." Lucy grinned, her eyes like with youthful energy. "I've been dying to see this mom exhibit. You can't back out on me now." "I wouldn't dream of it," Emma promised, ushering Lucy inside. They spent the evening catching up on Lucy's classes, her art projects, and mutual friends. Lucy's chatter about color theory and modernist influences reminded Emma just how different their worlds were. Lucy buoyed by creativity and ambition, and Emma tethered to the practicalities of daily survival. Still, they found common ground in memories of their late parents and the silly inside jokes only they understood. Early the next morning, they headed into Manhattan. The subway ride passed in a blur of Lucy's excitement about seeing famous paintings. Emma tried to soak up her sister's enthusiasm, while a flicker of anticipation danced in her chest. James had messaged asking if she was free for a small surprise. She told him that she was taking Lucy to the museum, and to her astonishment, he hinted he might drop by at MoMA. Lucy was in her element, moving from one exhibit to another with unabashed awe. Emma followed, occasionally pausing to read the descriptions. She couldn't pretend to understand the deeper meanings behind every abstract piece, but she appreciated Lucy's passion. They were studying a series of vibrant abstract paintings, and Lucy's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smirked. "Hey Em, a friend of yours is texting me." Emma's brow furrowed. "A friend of mine. I gave James my number when I bumped into him in the hallway that day." Lucy reminded, "In case he ever needed to reach you but couldn't. Looks like he wants to meet up. He's, oh wow, he's actually here. Says he's near the lobby." Emma felt her stomach flipped. She had no idea James would come all the way to MoMA just to see her. "I guess we can go find him," she said, trying to sound calm. Her heart thudded a little faster. They'd made their way back toward the entrance, weaving through the crowd of art enthusiasts. Sure enough, James stood by a striking sculpture, looking slightly out of place, but smiling when he spotted them. He wore a simple black jacket in jeans, blending with the throng of tourists, and seemed relieved when Lucy and Emma approached. "Hi there," he greeted, eyes bright. "Hope I'm not intruding. I know this was your sister weekend." Emma glanced at Lucy, who gave her an encouraging nudge. "It's fine," Emma assured him, "but I'm surprised you're here. We didn't really plan anything." James shrugged lightly. "I've never really explored. Mom figured this was as good a time as any. Plus, it's nice to see you outside the hospital setting." Lucy seized the moment. "Well, then you can join us. I'd love to get more opinions on the art." Emma's always so polite, but I suspect she's bored by half of it, she teased. Emma shot her sister a playful glare. "I'm not bored, I'm just not an arts scholar." They spent the next hour strolling through various galleries. Lucy led the conversation about artists' techniques, while James listened politely, asking questions that showed genuine curiosity. Emma observed how comfortable Lucy seemed with him, occasionally giving her sister a subtle thumbs up as if confirming he was indeed a decent person. At one point they reached a rooftop terrace, offering a skyline view. Lucy wandered off to snap photos of the cityscape for future painting inspiration, leaving Emma and James by the railing. The crisp air rushed against them, and Emma couldn't help noticing James shivering slightly, not used to being out in the cold. She teased softly, recalling how he told her He'd mostly been indoors before deciding to take his break. He chuckled, rubbing his hands together. You could say that I'm learning to appreciate life's little discomforts and wonders. He gave her a thoughtful look. Thanks for letting me tag along, Emma shrugged, trying to sound casual. Lucy likes you. She's usually a good judge of character. James hesitated, then softly touched Emma's arm. I'm glad, and I'm grateful you're giving me a chance to be part of your world. Even if it's just for a few hours, it means a lot. Their eyes met, and Emma felt an unspoken understanding pass between them, a sense that both of them were stepping into familiar territory. She was welcoming him into the tight circle of her life, and he was letting her see glimpses of his, however limited they might be, before they could say more. Lucy bounded back, waving her phone. Got the best photos. You two should see this view. Come on, James chuckled, and Emma smiled warmly as they followed Lucy. Emma realized something. She was no longer standing on the edges waiting for life to pass by. She was in the midst of it, forging new connections, taking steps beyond her usual boundaries. And although she felt a flutter of nerves, she also felt a growing sense of hope that this journey into the unknown might lead to something wonderful. A week later, Emma found herself in a trendy downtown bistro, which was miles apart both literally and figuratively from the small diners she typically visited. The wooden tables were decorated with minimalist centerpieces, and soft ambient music played. She felt mildly out of place in her simple blouse and sensible shoes. James across the table from her looked equally casual, wearing a plain navy sweater and dark jeans, yet he seemed oddly comfortable in this upscale environment. Emma eyed the menu, noticing that prices for even a simple dish were higher than she usually pay. I'm not sure I belong in a place like this, she joked, half serious. James leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Trust me, I don't either, he said, a playful glint in his eye. But a friend recommended it. Figured we could try something new. She took a breath, reminding herself of Margaret's advice. Be cautious yet open. It had become a mantra every time she stepped outside her comfort zone with James. After ordering, they settled into easy conversation about the small details of their day. Emma told him about a feisty elderly patient who insisted on giving all the nurses candy bars, while James mentioned he'd spent the afternoon wandering a different neighborhood in the city just for the experience. When their food arrived, a delicately prepared salmon dish for Emma and a hearty pasta for James, Emma's eyes widened. Wow, this looks fancy, he laughed softly. Maybe a bit, but I think we deserve a nice dinner. She paused, uncomfortable with the thought of an expensive meal. Then she reminded herself she hadn't forced him to bring her here. Besides, James had insisted so. She picked up her fork and took a bite, the blend of flavors almost startling her. Okay, it's definitely good, she admitted, her face lighting up with a grin as they ate. Emma noticed James was more talkative, yet he still skirted direct questions about his past. He mentioned a distant father who was demanding and hinted at a large family business, but never detailed its scope. Emma didn't want to pry, especially when it seemed to make him tense, yet a part of her couldn't help but wonder what he was hiding. Midway through the meal, James's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then quickly set it face down on the table, a brief flicker of worry on his face. Everything okay? Emma asked. He forced a tight smile. Yeah, just a friend needing something. It can wait. Emma sipped her water, sensing he wasn't telling the whole truth. Though uneasy, she decided to let it go. So you told me you enjoy traveling. Where have you been? That question brightened his expression. He shared stories about visiting Europe as a teenager, being fascinated by historical buildings and different cultures. But again, Emma noted, he avoided talking about what allowed him to travel so frequently. He made it sound like it was a youthful adventure, breezing past any mention of finances. Eventually, dessert menus arrived, but Emma declined. I shouldn't, she said, patting her stomach with a playful groan. I'm already spoiled by that. Yet each unanswered question loomed, hinting at future complications. They arrived at her building, a modest brownstone walk-up. Emma thanked him for dinner, a swirl of gratitude and lingering curiosity filling her chest. The cab pulled away, leaving her standing on the quiet sidewalk, daisies still on her kitchen table from their previous outing. She climbed the stairs, pondering the strangeness of her current situation. She was more than a nurse or a caregiver. For Lucy tonight, in that upscale bistro, she'd been simply Emma, a woman discovering new tastes, and forging a delicate bond with someone whose life remained largely unexplained, and though uncertain certainty lingered, she felt a small thrill knowing that the ordinary boundaries of her world were widening with every step. Lucy had returned to her college dorm in Boston, but her weekend visit to New York had left Emma feeling closer to her sister and surprisingly to James as well. In the days that followed, Emma found her routine peppered with short bursts of connection. A warm text message from James in the middle of her shift, a quick phone call during his morning walk. It felt odd to have someone checking on her well-being, not out of professional obligation, but genuine care. Margaret, ever watchful, cornered Emma. One afternoon in the break room, the older nurse placed 2 steaming mugs of coffee on the table and slid one toward Emma. So Margaret began, arching an eyebrow. "You seem lighter on your feet lately. Things going well with our mystery man?" Emma attempted a nonchalant shrug, but the faint blush on her cheeks gave her away. "We've been hanging out," she admitted. "He's sweet, thoughtful. I don't have to pretend around him." Margaret's expression softened. "That's good. The best relationships let us be ourselves." Emma nodded, sipping the coffee. Then she glanced around to ensure no one else was listening. "It's just he's so private about certain things. I can't help wondering if there's some huge secret I'm missing." Maybe, Margaret mused. "Or maybe he's just wary of letting people in." "You did say he left a high-pressure environment. Could be family drama, financial trouble. Who knows? If he treats you well, give him some room to open up." Emma exhaled, tension easing. "I guess you're right. I just don't want to set myself up a heartbreak." "Understood," Margaret said with a small, encouraging smile. "But heartbreak's a risk no matter how much we protect ourselves." That evening, Emma finished her shift exhausted. She was about to head home when her phone lit up with James's name. She answered wearily, though a smile broke through her fatigue. "Hey you," she greeted, voice softer than she intended. "Rough day?" James asked, concerned coloring his tone. "You could say that," Emma replied, leaning against a wall in the hospital lobby. "But it's over now. Do you have half an hour to spare? I'm nearby and could really use your opinion on something." Emma paused, eyeing the clock. She had chores to do, and tomorrow's shift loomed, yet she found herself intrigued. "Sure. Where are you?" He gave an address a few blocks away. Emma hopped on the next bus, curiosity mounting. 20 minutes later, she found herself outside a small, independently run community center. The building looked a bit rundown, but the windows were plastered with flyers for art classes, after-school programs, and local events. James stepped out of the entrance to greet her. "What's this place?" Emma asked, glancing around as they walked inside. "It's a center for underprivileged kids," she explained softly. "They host sports tutoring, that kind of thing. I discovered while exploring the neighborhood they need volunteers, people who can teach or mentor the kids." He looked at her hopefully. "I thought maybe you could help with a basic health workshop or something. I know you're busy, but I figure I'd ask." Emma looked at the worn basketball court where a handful of kids chased a ball. She felt a pang of empathy, remembering her own struggles growing up in a tight financial situation. "This is wonderful," she said, scanning the facility. "They're doing great work with limited resources." James led her to a small office where a coordinator, M. Ramirez, welcomed them warmly. She beamed when Emma said she was a nurse. "We'd love any guidance you could offer, maybe a workshop on first aid or healthy eating habits." Miss Ramirez explained, "Our kids need practical skills." Emma's eyes shone with new purpose. "Absolutely. I can volunteer on a weekend or after a shift, schedule permitting." James watched the exchange with a quiet satisfaction, and Emma felt a surge of warmth. He wasn't just a man of pleasant dinners. He cared about giving back. Even the story. Continue Part 2. My story. Like and share, please.